You could always somewhat tell someone's character by the people that they associate with. Now, geopolitically on the world stage, who does the United States most associate with? Well, Israel, but also specifically Saudi Arabia. And this is why we're going to give you a specific update just on Saudi Arabia. Specifically, this one single local story from the Oregonian that talks about a Saudi student who fled from U.S. justice by fleeing the United States. Now, it seems like an ordinary story. It seems like a story that, it happens, but not until you look at the national scale when you have this in perspective and you find out that Saudi Arabia has a long history of helping its nationals, its citizens, of fleeing justice from the United States. And some of these stories are absolutely insane. I mean, we're talking DUI, we're talking rape, we're talking homicide, we're talking people being charged for manslaughter. All of them never faced justice. And we're finding out today that Saudi Arabia, who has been repeatedly helping their citizens evade prosecution, that this was always aware to the United States as they were fleeing back to the homeland, according to the FBI, the DHS, and other agencies that knew about this for more than a decade, as, of course, consecutive administrations in the United States, continuous presidents in the United States keep ignoring this issue and don't hold Saudi Arabia accountable, pretty much allowing them and their citizens to come into the United States, break whatever laws they want, and to flee the country without even a beep, without even any actual action done by the U.S. government, who, again, here, by this article here, according to successive American administrations, have avoided confrontation with the Saudi Arabian government, quote, out of concern that doing so might jeopardize Saudi cooperation in the fight against Islamist terrorism. I mean, this is absolutely, totally, that whole comment is just absolutely backwards when you look at who Saudi Arabia finances on the world stage, but that's a whole different issue. But Jason, what do you make of these cases? I mean, I want to get into some of them, but there's talks about a $1 million bail. There's talks about fake passports. What are some of the details that stick out to you here?
So in this latest case, by the way, this kid is in the United States studying at Portland University. The Saudi Arabian government is really funding the trip. From the details, he's the he's the son of a single mother kindergarten teacher that's over here, I believe, on an $1,800 a month stipend from the government. He ends up killing a girl in a hit and run, apparently while she was crossing the street, from what I read. Now, he gets arraigned. Originally, they want to set the bail at $280,000, but they think he's a large flight risk, so they do so at $1 million on a hit-and-run manslaughter charge is what it ends up going to. So he doesn't have a lot of money. It doesn't seem like he's going to be able to do anything about this. And instead, Saudi Arabian consulate gives him $100,000. Make sure to put it into his name to kind of build a wall of plausible deniability later and responsibility on him. And he uses that money to get out. He's then fitted with an ankle bracelet, and 2 weeks before his actual trial, Luke, he just kind of disappears. From accounts, a black SUV rolls up to his home. He has a packed backpack. They actually take him to the school where he cuts off the brace. He then is given a quote-unquote illicit passport and then taken on a plane back to Saudi Arabia. Many people believe a private jet. So basically they fit him with false identification that will get him through security and customs and back to his country, and he's never been seen again. Now, in this case, you may or may not have the accidental death of a girl. It's egregious, but in some of the other cases, we're talking about, violent sexual crimes, child abuse, and more. And like you said, there's a long-standing history of this because of our relationship with Saudi Arabia, because of our common interests against Iran and other nations that Saudi Arabia helps with. And let's not forget all the business dealings between, the United States, the Bushes, now the Kushners of the world, and Saudi Arabia, Luke. It's tragic, but not surprising.
It's surprising when you look at the stories and how, I mean, I mean, we talked about Saudi Arabia for a very long time, but just how local these stories are, and now finally someone has compiled, I think what was it, 20 of them, 20 cases, and this is what journalists were just able to find. I believe, in my opinion, there's likely more, because again, the Saudi government and the Saudi embassy, of course, is hiding, covering this up. The U.S. government doesn't want to admit to this at all. Continuous administrations are just ignoring it. Let's talk about some of these other stories, because you talked about kind of the kind of manslaughter, car accident stuff. There's another case with Fahid al-Gawhinti, who was in the U.S. studying on a scholarship from Saudi Arabia in Oklahoma, and he was accused of raping a woman in October 2014, and he failed to appear in court over the charges. And again, he mysteriously vanished. These people don't mysteriously vanish. Of course, that's impossible to do. And what happened here, most likely the Saudi Arabian embassy got involved and got him out of here. Police in Pennsylvania said college student Hani Al-Hamari was accused of attempted rape, forcible compulsion, unlawful restraint, harassment, and disorderly conduct. The Oregonian reported, citing court records, he was later bailed out by a fellow student and then flew from Detroit to an unknown destination. There's continuous stories. There's even stories about a 10-year-old being, I don't even want to say what happened here, but the stories are extremely gruesome. And for the Saudi Arabian government, that again is just acting like it's above the law to do this so in our face, to have these victims, to have children, to have people who were essentially killed here, whether by accident or on purpose, that still wasn't determined by a court of law. But the victims here have no justice at all. These people, some people who might have serial, actions of abuse, are still continuing to live their lives unabated because of the United States not growing a backbone, turning a blind eye to this, and taking one up the wazoo because of what? Geopolitical nonsense, bullcrap, which is not even needed on the world stage. We went into great detail about how Saudi Arabia is ultimately not an ally to the United States in so many different ways. I mean, the values couldn't be any more different with the next stories that I kind of want to bring up here. I don't know if you want to talk about or introduce some of these clips, but there's incredible cases of people, literally, some people as young as 16 years old in Saudi Arabia that just send a message on WhatsApp calling for anti-government demonstrations that are literally beheaded. Yes, this is what happens. This is one of our chief allies that, of course, the United States is totally mum on, totally silent about, and allows their citizens to be above the law here in the United States, doing other unlawful, illegal, insane, brutal acts that, of course, there's absolutely no justice for. This is crazy, Jason. This should be a highlight. This should be talked about widely, because the reason it's not an issue is because no one is talking about this. The United States authoritative establishment media doesn't criticize Saudi Arabia as much as it does Iran, Syria, and other geopolitical foes. But when we look at one of the U.S.'s main allies, holy cow, there's a lot of dirt, there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of immoral, illegal, horrible actions that defy human law, in my book, Jason.
Well, I think that the most important thing that people need to be made aware of is it's not just a WhatsApp message. This person was involved in peaceful anti-government demonstrations and protests, and that is an essential tool for free and open societies to have, so that they can express themselves when their government is acting out of line. And to just simply try to organize or send information to people through a social media app and meet the Grim Reaper loop, that's dark.
Yeah, specifically, he was detained and accused of being a terrorist for sending texts online about an anti-government demonstration. He was 16 years old. Allegedly, according to some sources, he was even threatened to have his family assassinated and killed if he didn't confess to these crimes. And this person's going to be beheaded, according to, of course, Zero Hedge and everything that we're reading from this article. And that's absolutely insane. Keep going, Jason. I cut you off there. Sorry.
Yeah, the bottom line is, guys, this is something that we should be really concerned with. Not only the brutal way in which they're killed. I mean, this isn't even like a firing squad where, some of the guns are loaded with dummies, so nobody knows who actually commits this act. A man has to stand next to another man who is on his knees, tied up and blindfolded, and behead him with a sword. It's 2019. Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't like to get involved militarily with any other nation, but I certainly don't like to endorse a society that has that type of moral values where people gather in public squares to watch these things. It's just not something that I think is okay. And especially when we're not even talking about actual criminals, we're talking about people that are trying to stand up for their God given human rights, Luke.
Yeah. And we have to understand we're extremely blessed to live in a Western world where still some elements of free speech are respected, because slowly and surely, especially with the massive privacy violations that keep occurring in our country, we have to keep a watchful eye, because, this is a slippery slope. This is something that if the United States allows another country to get away with, who says that they're not going to, of course, pursue similar means and ways. I mean, Barack Obama already assassinated an American 16-year-old citizen, and the U.S. mainstream media was mum about it. We were the only news organization to follow up and to get actual comments and talking points from the Obama administration about this legal precedent of Obama being the judge, jury, and executioner in the case of a 16-year-old American citizen who was killed. Again, Snowden says it best. Under observation, we act less free, which means we are efficiently are less free. We are being observed more than ever, and that's why we need to keep a watchful eye so we don't create a situation like Saudi Arabia, and we need to speak out against what Saudi Arabia is doing in their country, and now specifically what they're doing inside of this country, allowing their citizens to essentially get away with horrible crimes and actions. Now, of course, some people may say, well, these are only a couple dozen cases that happen here. Again, this is only few cases that were able to be found. I bet that there's probably a lot more that we don't know about, since there's an active cover-up by the Saudi government and the U.S. government that needs to be highlighted here and understood. That's my take on it. Anything else we should get into, and do you want to close it off here, Jason?
No, I think that's about all I want to talk about on this subject. But guys, I don't want to live in a society like this. And our society is becoming more and more authoritarian by the day. Our information is being more and more restricted by the day, not only across social media platforms, but really in everyday conversations. The conversations have not widened. No, they have not expanded. They've contracted. And as that happens, as the government takes a larger role in restricting what you can see on Facebook, on Twitter, don't be surprised if laws like this come to the United States. We may not be beheaded in a square, but when you can take somebody like Chelsea Manning and put them in solitary confinement for a secret trial, which is all about sharing information with the public, well, who knows where we'll go from there. Folks, we're doing 4 videos a week on 2 separate platforms, Pulse Change and We Are Change. If you're not subscribed, please, 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 please do so. Ring those bells for notifications and get out there and be the change you want to see in the world.